Welcome everyone to A2K. We are an online group for isolated believers, Biblical Unitarians, and today we're going to talk about the practice of silence and solitude, um, and specifically in the context of living in a noisy world. This one is not something that often gets practiced. It's very difficult to do sometimes because we have to stop what we're doing to refocus ourselves and be silent and quiet, get away from all the noise that we have in our lives. There are so many distractions that we experience. So we really have to be intentional about doing this if we're going to do it in a way that benefits us and others spiritually. Um, our church did a series called Practicing the Way a while back. So those of you in our group will remember that. And one of the spiritual practices that we talked about was silence and solitude. So I think it'd be good to review that practice and maybe go into a little bit more about it today and think about some different aspects of it and see if we can, I don't know how everyone's doing with incorporating that, but I think for me, I need to incorporate it a little bit more into my life. So I thought as a community, we can encourage each other to do that. So question, when was the last time that you sat silently for a few minutes, just got away? Maybe, just for a few minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, you sat maybe outside, sat and just listened to sounds of nature. You just listened to God. You sat quietly in your room and just without distractions, noise, things like that, and without outside influence. How did you feel when you did that? Was that uncomfortable for you? Did you experience peace or anxiety? So if you've been doing this practice, you might, if it's new to you, you might not be used to that, and you might have different responses to silence. Did your mind fill up with thoughts about unfinished tasks, past regrets, and randomness, just random thoughts? Some of you may be comfortable with silence, and maybe you felt total peace when you did this and enjoyed fellowship with the Lord, and reflected upon his goodness in your lives. Others of you, if you have recently done this, you might have experienced chaos and panic while you did it. You might really had some anxious and racing thoughts as you did this. So we might all be in a different place when it comes to doing this practice, but we're going to learn a little bit more about how we can get comfortable with this and how it can really benefit us as believers. So we are going to talk about noise. Noise is pretty pervasive in our lives. It is constant. It is something that keeps us from experiencing God sometimes. And when we don't have noise, it actually feels wrong to us a lot of times. It feels like we're missing something. So the absence of silence in our lives, a lot of us don't have that built into our lives. So when we have silence, it can make us feel really uncomfortable when it comes. So in the Bible, God shows us how silence and solitude are essential to quieting the excess noise and to experiencing his presence as a part of our spiritual foundation. So we'll see that we've got to get that noise quieted down in order for us to connect with God and hear from him and to really get to the deep parts of our soul that we're trying to form spiritually. So we also see that silence and solitude go together. The practices are related, but they're not the same. So silence is the absence of noise, and that removes distractions from ourselves. When we practice silence, we're not distracted within our minds. We're getting silent and focusing on God. Solitude is the absence of people. So we're removing distractions from others when we practice solitude. But the purpose of solitude is not necessarily to be completely isolated and alone and to feel alone by yourself. the purpose of solitude is that you can actually connect with God. It can be a time to experience the presence of the Lord. So combining silence and solitude allows us to clear out both inner and outer clutter. So we'll read a few little verses here to kind of to help us understand how, the benefits of this. It says Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth." Psalm 62:5 says, God alone, my soul, for God alone, my soul waits in silence, for my hope is from him. Isaiah 30:15 says, for thus said the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, in returning and rest, you shall be saved. In quietness and trust shall be your strength. So, we see how God shows up for us when we are able to get away and be silent and still before him, and we get to really experience more of a deep connection with God. We're able to kind of get to the core of what we really what is really important with our relationship with God. So we're going to see in Psalms, several different Psalms. I'm sure there are more. These are just some pretty good examples that I found of silence and solitude that David kind of shows us how he has benefited from silence. And so we're going to look at Psalm 62 verses 1 and 2 and verses 5 and 6. And it says, for God alone my soul waits in silence, from him comes my salvation. He is my rock and my salvation, my fortress, I shall never be shaken. And actually verses 5 and 6 are exactly the same. I think maybe one word is different. But I think it's important to note here, though, it's not for the sake of repetitiveness. There's a purposeful repeating here of those verses, because we want to be able to further reflect and reinforce the idea that that David's saying here that God comes and speaks to him when he waits in silence. God, he remembers who he is and how he relates to God when he is silent. So when you wait for God in silence, God shows up. Psalm 4:4 is another example where David kind of tells himself to tremble and do not sin. Meditate in your heart upon your bed and be still. So it's thinking about when you have anxious thoughts and you're having, especially like when you're having trouble sleeping, for example, that, don't get one way to, really do this is to be meditating upon the things of God, be, silent and still at times when you're afraid, and, don't fear. Basically, we're always tempted to really spiral in our anxious thoughts, and we see here that we can be peaceful. Just kind of let yourself relax into the presence of God. That's not always easy. That's a difficult practice when you're really frazzled, but we can see that eventually God will show up for us. Psalm 37:7 says, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways. So David here is, he understands the importance of silence for peace and to strengthen his faith. And he knows, when we're tempted to toward anxiety and envy, that we can be still before the Lord and that we can experience the presence of God. So that's what we're supposed to do when we're struggling with those anxious thoughts and seeing others that are, that may be evil people succeed. And while you're suffering, we know that we can be still and trust in God, wait for him. So he doesn't come immediately. Sometimes we really have to be quiet and just be patient and peaceful. Okay, so we talked about solitude also is an important practice, and Jesus practiced solitude. We see several examples of this in the Gospels. So Luke 5:16 says, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." And we see that Jesus especially practiced solitude and private prayer with God when an important event or a decision was about to occur. So when he was about to choose his 12 disciples and start gathering them, um, it says in Luke 6:12 and 13, it says, "Now during those days he went out to the mountain to pray, and he spent the night in prayer to God. And when the day came, he called his disciples and chose 12 of them, whom he also named apostles." And we see him in Matthew 14:13, after his cousin John the Baptist was killed. It says that now when Jesus heard about this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. So he was pretty grieved by his cousin's death, so he went out and to pray. And then before his death on the cross, he was clearly in much grief. He was with his disciples, and then we'll see that he ended up going away. It says he came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not come into the time of trial." Then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, knelt down and prayed. So we see he goes off a little bit. He goes out with his disciples and asks them to pray. And then he kind of goes a little bit away to pray privately. So we see how Jesus, in these situations, he models solitude and prayer alone with God very well. He also shows how prayer can be communal and solitary. So we have both practices here. But we see, throughout the Gospels and Jesus's life, how his solitude and his relationship deeply formed his relationship with God. And that's how I believe he was formed, to be able to completely submit to the Father's will, because he knew God's heart for people. He spent so much time in prayer with God and in solitude and in community that he was able to completely know what God wanted him to do, and that really empowered him to submit to God and to be all the things that he is to us, to completely be Lord, basically. So what are the benefits and fruits of solitude and silence? So what will you experience if you regularly practice solitude and silence in your spiritual life? So you'll probably have a calmer, less reactive spirit. You can have peace with God and yourself. You can have a clearer discernment of God's will, because you can actually hear from him. And you will also have more awareness of God's nearness in ordinary life. So as you'll see, when you try to practice this, just remember that the goal of silence and solitude is not to escape the world. It's to form your inner world into that of a kingdom-minded person. So there really are great benefits to this practice. So how do we do it? Sometimes we don't know exactly what we should do. So here are some practical tips on putting this to practice. So first of all, we just read some examples of what David and Jesus did, and then there's many other people that did this as well. Reflect on those things that you see in the Bible. See the models that you have for you, and try to emulate those. You can start small. You could do 2 to 5 minutes each day. And the point is, you want to create a rhythm in your day or your week to do this. So if you want to you've got to set a little bit of time aside, and it doesn't have to be much to really experience the benefits of this. And you don't want to, you can start big if you want, but I think usually starting small helps when doing new things. You also want to eliminate possible distractions. So our phones are probably one of the biggest distractions that we experience. So you could either put your phone in another room, or you might find the best way to do this is to practice silence and solitude before you even look at your phone in the morning. So you're not thinking about what you already looked at on your phone that day, but maybe just do it first thing before you are thinking about anything else. And in the same way, practice before any other distractions come up for your day, before, your family wakes up and needs something from you, before you've got to get ready for work. Just, start that before the busyness of the day really gets going. You can do this. You can turn off radio or music in your car and be silent on a driving in your car is a good time to not be as distracted. If you're on a fairly long drive, you can be silent. And also just going outside and being renewed by God's creation. Sometimes if you can get to a quiet place outside, it's a good way to connect with God and to be kind of outside of your normal life distractions. So also you're going to need to be prepared that noise is going to rise up when you're trying to be silent a lot of times. So just be prepared to redirect yourself and don't feel like you have to be perfect with it. Just keep going back to that silence if you get distracted. Also be prepared and okay with the fact that you're going to feel uncomfortable with silence and solitude. It's not going to feel natural to you because most of our lives are filled with a lot of noise and activity and distraction. So I think if you keep doing it, you'll start to feel more comfortable with it. So don't freak out that you're feeling really uncomfortable with it. It's okay. If it feels weird to you, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just very different from what you're used to. You can also, as part of the redirection process, lift up your distracting thoughts to God. If there are things that are just, getting in the way of you being able to be still and quiet and peaceful, talk to God about it. Tell him. That's part of your practice of being with him, is you get to tell him what things are going on in your life. That could be part of your solitude experiences, being able to give those distractions and the noise in your life to God. And finally, I think it's important to remember that silence and solitude are about reflection, not perfection. So don't put that pressure on yourself to do it perfectly, or that you're not doing it long enough or whatever, but it's about experiencing God and reflecting on your life and what God has for you. So don't get too stuck thinking that you're not doing it perfectly. So those are just some practical ways you can do that. So now, what we'll kind of do, I think a good passage to really get you reflecting, kind of get you in a quiet place where you feel connected to God. This is my favorite Psalm. I think it's a pretty popular one, but nonetheless, it's popular for a reason, because it's so personal. It connects us with God. So we can't, you know, like I said, we can't do solitude in a corporate setting, but we're gonna kind of prepare ourselves to do a little bit of silence together in a corporate setting. I want us to kind of get more comfortable with that. And but first we're gonna read Psalm 139 to kind of get us in that just mode of connecting with God. So I'm just gonna read Psalm 139 to you, and then we will start our moment of silence. So just, as we read this, just listen and reflect on your relationship with God and how much he knows you and how he wants to commune with you. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! I try to count them, they are more than the sand. I come to the end, I am still with you. Oh, that you would kill the wicked, O God, and that the bloodthirsty would depart from me, those who speak of you maliciously and lift themselves up against you for evil. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. So now we're going to practice silence today by just doing 2 minutes with no noise. We're not going to play any music. I know there might be some unavoidable noise where you are. Let's see if you can just kind of tune that out and just spend some time with God in silence, silent prayer, just listening for him. If you don't know what to pray for, think about, just we're going to just have a little time um, to practice it for those of us that have not incorporated this practice into your role of life. So we'll start now. Okay, so that was just 2 minutes of silence. Um, so notice how that felt to you. Maybe it was peaceful. Maybe it was awkward and you felt very uncomfortable. That's okay. Maybe you were wondering when the time was going to run up the whole time. I'm not sure. But um, however you experience that, know that you can meet this kind of quiet in your everyday life if you really make time for that. And I think that God wants you to meet you there in fellowship, to love you, to instruct you, and to form you into the kind of person he wants you to be. Those are just some things that we can think about and reflect upon as we strive to incorporate the spiritual practices of silence and solitude into our lives. So now we will open it up for a time of discussion.